Call Mrs. Dunja Simonovic-Bratic to support Amendment 15. You have 30 seconds. Sorry. Mrs. Kovacs, you will
Thank you. Actually,
okay.
Mr. President, I would take over if you allow me. As the rapporteur said, and we could hear today, this report is without defining the status or statehood of Kosovo, as it was said. So therefore, we agree that it is important international treaties, possible commitments here from the report, but it would be important to insert a paragraph, and the main part of the paragraph is that everything is without prejudice of the international legal status of Kosovo and Metohija as a territory under international administration and as a part of Republic of Serbia. So it would be in line with the rapporteur's opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Boulay has asked to speak against the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. We make a very clear distinction of the word status and statehood, and we operate now with the understanding of an independent state, not dealing with a part of another state. So this is why we strongly oppose this amendment. Thank you.
The committee rejected this amendment with a 2/3 majority. I shall now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. Amendment 15 is rejected. Amendment number 9. I call Mrs. Dunja Simonovic-Bratic to support amendment number 9. You have 30 seconds.
If it is possible. Dear colleagues,
Mrs. Kovacs, okay.
Thank you. As we all know, the Committee of Ministers asked for our opinion of the recommendation of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, and the decision will be final, as we could hear, at the Committee of Ministers. But anyway, we would like to put here that the Assembly recommends that the Committee of Ministers postpone its decision on the application of membership and until the United Nations Security Council finally determines or endorses the status of Kosovo and Metohija. It would be extremely important. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Valbe. You have asked to speak against.
And we strongly recommend the opposite. So the Committee of Ministers asked us for our opinion. We will give our opinion now, I think with a quite clear majority. We ask the Committee of Ministers to react on this as soon as possible, and this is in May, so with a very vast majority we were against this amendment.
I shall now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. The amendment 9 is rejected. Amendment number 14. I call Mrs. Elisabetta Gardini to support amendment 14. You have 30 seconds.
Yes. I'd also like to present a sub-amendment, but addressing the amendment, this is yet again the same issue of underlining the implementation of the Brussels and Ohrid agreements, including the establishment of the Association of Serb-majority municipalities. These are agreements which have been entered into, and there is an agreement on it, and therefore it's important, I think, to underline this. Thank you.
Speak against.
Yes, President. Again, this is an issue that is covered in the opinion. The rapporteur has explained in detail how to proceed on this. This amendment is not in line with the rapporteur's explanation and position. That's why it has been rejected by a 2/3 majority in the committee and should be rejected now.
As Mr. Steele said, the committee rejected this amendment with a 2/3 majority. I shall now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the results to be displayed. Amendment 14 is rejected. Amendment number 10. I call Mrs. Dunja Misimonovic-Bratic to support amendment number... Mrs. Kovacs.
Thank you,
We hear
Mr.
you.
President. There is no point of agreements if we don't force them to be implemented. So we agree with this really good paragraph, but at the end of it, we would like to add a really good sentence, and which is logical, that the Assembly invites the Committee of Ministers to ensure that Kosovo acts in accordance with the agreement on regional representation and cooperation reached back in 2012 under the European Union Facilitated Dialogue and fully implements the agreements reached under the EU Facilitated Dialogue. I know that the others would say it's not important, but how can it be not important? If we speak about the European integration of Kosovo and Western Balkans, just think about it. It's not logical. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boulay. You have asked to speak against the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. What I not find logical at all is some Serbian MPs feeding with hate the anti-EU speech at home day by day, and then referring to a solution offered now. So I totally reject this as I see it as a sign of lack of consequence for the matter of this file. Thank you.
The committee rejected this amendment with a two-thirds majority, and I shall now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the results to be displayed. Amendment 10 is rejected. Amendment number 6, I call Mrs. Kovacs. You have 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am really shocked with Mr. Bulay's reaction, but because I am definitely not anti-European. I am the chair of the European Integration Committee, and I'm really trying to speak sophisticatedly here, you must admit. And at least I'm standing. Please, everybody, people cannot hear you, but just to explain, here again, statehood and status. So we asked at least to change the word. There was no understanding for the Serbian delegation, therefore we ask for the deletion of this paragraph. Thank you.
Who wishes to speak against? Mr. Boulay.
Well, for the same reasons, there's no need to explain the difference between status and statehood. So let us be reasonable this evening. Otherwise, we are hilarious. Thank you.
Sorry.
But I should stand up, no.
I'm trying to do it as fast as I can without undermining the procedure. So, the committee rejected this amendment with a two-thirds majority. I shall now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. Amendment 6 is rejected. Amendment 7. I call Mrs. Kovacs.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is really interesting that we spoke here officially that it's not about the status. So if some of the countries or member states hasn't recognized Kosovo yet, but this paragraph would suggest, nevertheless, you must, how it is formulated here, irrespective of the position, we should behave like everything is okay. So as you could hear in the speech of my colleagues, you don't care about Serbia. So the Serbian MPs will be forced to leave this assembly. And for me, it is extremely difficult. So please, it's really not a win-win situation. Please think about it carefully. We suggested the deletion of this paragraph.
Thank you, Mrs. Kovacs. Does anyone wish to speak against Mr. Zwabe?
We want to monitor the situation of people in the bigger Europe. This is the aim, not that anybody should leave. We have a very clear text, and this is nothing, again, about the status. I think the rapporteur made it very clear. It's about human rights and how we can monitor it, and so for sure we should vote against this amendment.
The committee rejected this amendment with a two-thirds majority, and I shall now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. Amendment 7 is rejected. Amendment 8. I call Mrs. Kovacs.
Thank you, Distinguished President. Since it is obvious that the colleagues are not ready to listen other opinions, and these were the most important paragraph, and we suggested deletion of it, it is interesting that during this debate, which lasted, thankfully, more than 2 hours, we haven't heard how does it come that the rapporteur hasn't managed to go to Belgrade. And the Political Affairs Committee had the authorization of her visit to Belgrade. It is interesting, you finished everything in 1 year, missing the capital of Serbia. So please, Mr. Schwab and others, do not try to convince me that it is for the sake of everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kovacs. Mr. Schwab will speak against.
Interestingly, the rapporteur was in Belgrade and each and everywhere, and she really tried to do the best. She tried to make a balanced report. She was in Brussels each and everywhere. But again, this is the Council of Europe. This is about the question if we should monitor a part of this Council of Europe. Pierre-Alain Fredes showed the map. There is a grey part, and we want to give the right to 2 million people, including the Serb minority there. It's not about the status. So we should vote against this amendment.
The committee rejected this amendment with a two-thirds majority. I shall now put the amendment to the vote. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. Amendment 8 is rejected. We now proceed to vote on the draft opinion contained in document 15/958 as amended. I remind you that it was not, it is a mistake. I remind you that a two-thirds majority is required. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. The draft opinion is adopted. Dear colleagues, the Assembly will hold its next public sitting tomorrow at 2:30 p.m. with the agenda which was approved on Monday. The sitting is adjourned.